did it start for you? I mean, you've been performing for over a decade. How did it start for you?
All of it for me. I think, let me say thank you to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Diawinka. They gave me a good foundation reading, speaking my mother tongue with me at home.
Right. Which is what? Chi.
Chi.
Right.
So I speak Fanti, I speak Ikuapim, I speak Asante, Chi, and I speak Fanti.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I have the variations.
Right.
Yeah, of Chi. So I grew up reading a lot of books, both Ghanaian and then from the flip sides of the world. I also grew up watching By the Fireside, Bibi Groma Productions, listening to the likes of Ejako Nimo, Abriche Bakopi Sami. So Adedem was a thing for me. I love listening to African.
So just because our audience or our listeners and viewers are not just from Ghana, but in the diaspora, By the Fireside that he's talking about, so this was some sort of
storytelling live storytelling thing on television.
Yeah. Those kinds
so, in Africa, storytelling is communal. And so this was staged, a communal storytelling session with an elderly person and the children seated at their feet, and then they tell stories. And these are ways in which we convey our folklore, our poetry, our music, culinary art. All these ways are ways of sharing traditional knowledge. So I grew up feasting on these things. You realize that Adedem, or old high life music, is also a great repository of traditional knowledge. The elevated language that was used
traditional morals,
of these composers was fantastic. And so I grew up feeding on these things, not knowing what I was doing at the time. It just happened to appeal to me. I also happened to spend time with my late grandmother, who, I always mention this, was fond of throwing appellations at her grandchildren. And so I grew up hearing her call me Nana Asaase. I didn't know what it was until I realized my cousin was trying to say Nana Boachi and corrupts it to Nana Asaase.
Right.
But I say maybe it was something divine.
So that's how the name came about.
That's how the name came about.
Because, come to think of it, I was saying then that Nana means king, and Asaase is earth. So basically,
or land.
You are king of the earth.
King of the earth or king of the
land. Literary landscape, if you like.
Yeah.
So all of this was a coincidence.
It was some divine thing going on. At the time, we didn't know what it was.
Right.
At the time, I'd entered the library by class 3. I was reading Greek mythology. I didn't know what it was. But I seemed to enjoy the stories, and I had this fertile imagination that would take me on journeys when I read.
Right.
So this was how it started for me. And then in JHS 1, at that moment, something happens. There's an account proverb that says,
right.
It is via the help of the tree that the root or the vine gets to see the sky.
Right.
And so Professor Kofi Anyido, who used to run the African Heritage series on television. So there was a day he was with the late Professor Ali Mazrui. I had done a lot of reading, drama, poetry, all of that. But that moment brought everything together for me. They were talking about a temple in Dahomey. In Dahomey, in Benin, there's this temple dedicated to a rainbow and a serpent god or something.
Right.
That was not my interest.
Python,
But the voice. And so he goes, Dahomey, the home of the serpent and of the rainbow. And I was like...
It just hit you.
Look, it hit me. Look, man, I would sit up in the middle of the night. I told myself I want my voice to be that deep. Now I know I wasn't just looking for the texture.
Right.
It was a divine call.
Right.
And so I'd sit up in the middle of the night. Dahomey, the home of the serpent and of the rainbow. All the way from age 11.
That was the epiphany.
That was it.
It was that moment where you felt, this is what I want to do. I want to sound like this. I want to be like this.
And after that moment, I realized that there was a still voice that would dictate to me. On the back of that, our headmistress just enters the class one day and picks a couple of students, write a poem for me on books. That was it. Once I was done, I felt that this voice would dictate to me.
Right.
When I had pent-up emotions I couldn't share with anybody, I could take my pencil up, go to the paper, and then try to reason with the paper. At least it would give me room to put it down. People would probably offer resistance, but at least with my pencil going to the paper, it gave me enough room to think, because that was a blank page to think on. That is how the journey started for me. And I realized that it was also hinged on that good language development I had versus the reading I had done.
Right. So it all crystallized. Everything
came
together.
Came in to serve me. That was the moment.